Welcome everyone. I'm Debbie Lacey. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Eastside For All, a local nonpartisan nonprofit and one of the other local nonpartisan nonprofits that are co-hosts for tonight's event. Thank you to all the organizations that created this forum as one part of our broader housing work jointly on the East Side that we're doing. And if these East Side Housing Advocacy Partners could please raise your hand just so people visually can look around and see you and come meet you. Raise your hand if you're part of one of the organizations. Thank you very much. Thank you to the candidates for accepting our invitation and making the commitment to run for public office. With our focus tonight on housing, homes, I'd like to start by acknowledging the first peoples of this area who made this area their home. Our region lies on the unceded lands of the many tribes of the Coast Salish-speaking peoples, including the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Puyallup, Snoqualmie, Stillaguamish, and the Suquamish. We honor all who have held relationship with this land and its bounty for generations. Tonight we're raising issues that are priorities for those most impacted by the lack of affordable housing here in East King County. Those who have been displaced, who are at risk of being displaced, and those who are unable to live here because to feel closer to their jobs because of the expenses here. I'll briefly share some data to set the context for tonight's work. And we'll start with the first issue with the new housing units needed in the city of Redmond. Are those slides able to come up? There we go. Thanks. So of the 20,000 new housing units needed in Redmond in the next 20 years, so take that in for a moment, over half need to be affordable units for people with the lowest household income. That's 0 to 30% of the average median income. Next slide, please. The Lake Washington School District has 300 students currently experiencing homelessness, and student enrollment is projected to decrease by about over 700 students in the next 10 years. School districts facing this trend cite the lack of affordable housing as a key factor. Next slide. Like the rest of East King County, Redmond's demographics have changed significantly, and those of you who have been here for a while know that. Now, 51% of Redmond's population, and I'm sure it's higher even now since these figures were last cited, Redmond's population identifies as their race or ethnicity as something other than white alone. Black and Hispanic households have lower rates of home ownership and higher rates of various levels of housing cost burden. And later we'll share a slide with the data on home ownership disparities. So we are all experiencing the housing crisis in one way or another, right? But we aren't all experiencing it in the same ways. So with that bit of context setting, I'd like to now introduce our moderator. Great honor of mine to introduce Kim Sarnecki, who's known and loved by many of you here. Kim is the CEO of the Together Center here, an organization with a rich history of human service collaboration, community connection, and inclusion. She's knowledgeable and passionate about placemaking and community building, bringing a wealth of experience, including her prior role as the Director of Administration and Real Estate for Tides Converge, the largest shared space nonprofit center in the country. I bet some of you didn't know that. Many of you know the extraordinary accomplishment that Kim guided to fruition to reimagine the Together Center, now home to not just nonprofits, but individuals and families. A true community effort that brought so many people together toward this shared goal. And with that, I will turn it over to our moderator, Kim. Wow, thank you for that introduction.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to thank the candidates because I personally believe that running for public office takes a lot of courage, and I know it takes a lot of commitment. So thank you for that, and thank you for being here. I request that we give each other grace and respectfully make space for differing opinions this evening. I'd like to share the format for this evening. I'll pose questions to each candidate by position, alternating who answers first. The questions have been curated by the event organizers based on the issues their communities have prioritized and taking themes from questions submitted when people registered for this event. We ask that the candidates stay within the response time limits, and it's my task to help you do that. And we have a timekeeper here also, so you can look at the time clock. We'll have 60 to 90 seconds, and I'll let you know what amount of time you have. This is not a debate, so that we won't have rebuttals, and all candidates are invited to participate and accept it. So thank you all for being here. And we want to welcome the folks on the live stream. Thank you for joining and watching. And we invite everyone to share takeaways from tonight with friends and family. Okay, let's jump right in. We're going to have each candidate introduce themselves to start. You'll each have 60 seconds to introduce yourself and explain why you're running for office. And we're going to start with position 1 at the end with Nate.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Thank you also. I got to visit with Kim for just a little bit, and she explained kind of the Together Center and what an incredible, beautiful place this is, and just serves the community. And anyway, I'm Nate Niederhauser, running for Redmond City Council in position 1. And I've been here in Redmond for over 25 years. I live up on Education Hill and have 4 kids that went to the schools here. And why I jumped in, is this still working, is there was an open seat, and I've lived here for a long time. And just a lot of the changes that are taking place, want to make sure that we kind of jump in and help maintain the character of the community along with the growth that we have. And along with affordable housing, just since 2000, my taxes and escrow went up like $500 a month. And I'm kind of like, how do we do this? Can I even afford to stay here? And so those are some reasons why I'm jumping in and happy to be here tonight. How was that for time?
Can I stand?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Usman Salahuddin. I am running for Redmond City Council, position 1. It's truly an honor to be here in front of you all today and to run for city council in a city that I have grown up in. I've gone to public school here, gotten involved with local nonprofits, and this has been my home. I've seen the incredible growth over the past 27 years of my life, but I've also seen some of the challenges. I look up to my parents incredibly, they're one of the most important parts of my life. And my mom is a special education paraeducator. My dad is a small business owner. They have never been able to purchase their own home. I think that is a disservice to the community service that they've put in, a disservice to the city of Redmond in the future that we have looking forward. And I really want to be a change maker for the city to allow people like my parents and 51% of Redmond residents to be able to purchase a home, have a future in this community, and really be able to advocate and live their lives in a way that's meaningful for them and for everyone around them. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to answer your questions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Forsyth. I'm running to retain my seat on the Redmond City Council position 3. It's been an honor to serve the last 4 years, and it's been a very interesting 4 years to get into public office, but it's also been a really strong opportunity for us to show how we can lead. A few of the things I'm most proud of are adding funding to our senior lunch program, securing an additional $2.5 million for human services funding to keep folks fed during COVID, and raising the level around our small businesses and their struggle through COVID, and even meeting with Governor Inslee's chief policy advisor to share what was going on in our communities. We're at a very interesting time for continued growth in our city, and we've got to get it right, and we've got to dig deep on affordable housing policy. Your involvement here tonight is a part of that, so thank you all for being here, and I hope to continue to be the voice of you all in this process that we call city government. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Kritzer. I'm the current Vice President of the Redmond City Council, and I'm running for a second term for position 5 because I love Redmond and I love seeing the way that this community is developing, but I want to make sure that as it develops, that this can be a place where people can live regardless of their income or background, and that everyone can feel a sense of belonging. It's been a project that I've worked on actually since before I was even a city council member when I joined the Planning Commission in Redmond. And actually at that time I was the only renter on the commission, that I've been working for years to be able to really make sure that we address our affordable housing needs and that we have housing for a variety of income levels. While on the council, I've been proud to be able to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in rental assistance to help people through the pandemic, to pass our first tenant protections, and also to invest millions of dollars into affordable housing, including putting above and beyond resources into supporting the Together Center and making this project a reality. So I humbly ask for your vote. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I'm David Carson, and I'm running for re-election to position 7. And my wife and I moved here after college. We live in the Marymore Hill neighborhood of just south of Marymore Park. One of the things that I want to see us do with housing, and I'm really concerned because I've talked to folks my age that currently own houses, but there are no opportunities for them to downsize into something where they can continue to hold equity. And so that missing middle piece for ownership, to me, is a big problem. We have a state legislature that hasn't made enough movements in that direction for builders to want to build them, condominiums, that is. And so, for example, we started an apartment, we moved to a condominium at River Trail, got the house now, but we can't downsize because we can't put our equity anywhere. So that's what I want to see us really concentrate on.
Hi, my name is Angie Nueva Camina, and I'm running for Redmond City Council Position 7. I am grateful to call Redmond home and have lived here for the past 10 years. My daughter graduated from Lake Washington High School in 2017 when we lived on Rose Hill. And now living in downtown Redmond, my son is currently a student at both Redmond High and here at Cascadia at Running Start. I currently have my own financial services practice based out of downtown Bellevue. I'm a Redmond City Planning Commissioner and advisor on several area committees, a member of Leadership Eastside Cohort 2024, and an avid Redmond High School football and lacrosse fan. As a Chicana with African American heritage and raised in a multiracial Black family who is a single parent, a veteran, renter, member of the LGBTQ+ community who has lived at several income levels, ranging from deep poverty to a homeowner in Edmonds, Washington, I bring a lived experience that does not currently exist here on the dais. With the diverse experiences that I've had, this enables me to become a bridge builder and solution-based leader. A candidate like me will be a tremendous value add to the council and our region. Thank you.
Thank you to the sponsors and all of you for being here tonight. Hello, I'm Angela Burney. I am the mayor of Redmond. Before mayor, I was on the city council for 4 years, and 2 years of that being council president. I have spent my 25+ years in the city of Redmond volunteering throughout our community. I am very proud of my record as mayor over the last 4 years. I have worked tirelessly for the city and region by building relationships, leveraging partnerships, and getting things done for our community. I will continue working to ensure Redmond is a more livable, sustainable, and connected community. I have an extensive record of working locally, regionally, and nationally on many issues important to our community, including the issues on this forum tonight is focused on this evening for housing and homelessness. I and Redmond have been and will continue to lead on these issues, showing how to create more housing in all its forms so that anyone who wants to live in Redmond can live in Redmond. Thank you.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Hi there, my name is Jerry Lee Anderson. I'm serving my 6th year on the Redmond City Council, and I'm very grateful to be here tonight. Thank you to HTC for hosting us. And I'm running for mayor this November. I am running for mayor to help Redmond get beyond business as usual, and I believe that I'm the type of person that can make that happen. My leadership values include integrity, stewardship, inclusiveness, and inspiration, and I build and maintain all of my professional, personal, and political relationships around those democratic values. I'm running for mayor because as a social entrepreneur, a CEO, and an engineer, I'm not allergic to change, failure, or accountability, and facing the triple threats of affordability, social disparities, and climate change, we need someone as mayor who can make bold system-level changes quickly and transparently to get on a new pathway to success. The Redmond community needs to be able to trust the mayor to deliver on those changes, and this all needed to happen yesterday. And I would love the responsibility to help Redmond get next steps forward. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. The first question we're going to dive into is around tenant protections, and you'll each have 90 seconds to respond. One key aspect of having a vibrant and thriving community is ensuring that residents have housing stability. Tenant protections increase housing stability by providing renters with security and predictability in their housing situations. As can be seen in the slide here, by the candidates, jurisdictions have implemented various types of tenant protections to help improve housing stability. In 2022, Redmond passed a slate of tenant protection ordinances looking at these ordinances and what other jurisdictions surrounding have implemented, what, if any, additional protections and/or policy clarifications would you support to ensure more housing stability? And we're going to start with position 3, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, so it was a great honor to pass the first housing tenant protections bill that we did. And there are some loopholes that exist within that. We heard from many residents that they knew that tenant protections had passed and their landlords were not informing them of the lease changes. And when it came to time for their leases to be up, they would say, oh, well, you're going to go on month to month now, and there's an extra $100 because we're putting on month to month prior to your rent increase that will be in effect in 60 or 90 days. So I think we need to close that gap because that is unfair to folks who were actively trying to get their rental information and what was going to happen. There are a number of things on here as well. I think if you find a place to live that you want to live and you're within your month of your lease expiring, we need to make sure that you can have that access to that mobility and be able to make that change so that you don't miss out on a potential housing opportunity that you can afford. It's so hard to find affordable housing right now. And if you find something in your budget, we need to do everything we can to make sure that you have the access to that option.
Well, thank you so much for bringing up this question. I'm really proud to have been a part of passing Redmond's tenant protections and especially encouraging our neighboring cities to also pass similar protections. As many of you may know, the recommendations that we passed came from a regional coalition on housing as they saw the residents that were living within affordable housing units in our community at risk as there were increases projected in rent. And it was really important to me to be able to do this. Also really important to me, I would say in particular, this issue as a parent, being able to talk with families of young children in our community who often, in seeing some of these raised rents, have to deal with tough choices of maybe having to move their family right during the school year. So part of what we worked on was making sure that we had, that we gave people more time to be able to deal when rental prices went up. One of the things that I would support is definitely making sure that when people do sign leases that they know about the protections that we passed, since I still hear from residents that they are not aware of it, as well as landlords. I think one of the things we could do in our city is invest in some staff that actually could be able to work on this and be able to ensure that they're working with landlords on that education. Secondly, I think that we could also look at being able to make sure that we're looking at rental properties in terms of a registration program and being able to do inspections so we have quality housing as well for people who are living in those units. And finally, I'm very interested in being able to support being able to close loopholes around just cause eviction. Thanks.
I'm grateful to have been able to be part of the tenant protection that we put in 2022. Back then, of course, I was not on the Planning Commission, nor was I a candidate running for office. I got to go and speak as a renter. I've been a renter here in the downtown area for 6 years. I completely agree and support with the protections that we put in place, as well as would like to see some further going as well. One of the loopholes that we found was that property owners or managers were giving, instead of the typical advance notice, they would say, well, your rent will go up at this percentage at 6 months, and if you wait 3 months, then it's going to go up at a higher percentage, and the closer you get to that date, then it goes up. And as Jessica had said, Councilmember Kretzer had said about having that loophole of when can a family break a lease, and if that has to do anything with during school, as a single parent myself, there's no way that I would be able to move around like that, which is actually one of the reasons why I stayed in my apartment now for 6 years. Having that access to mobility, especially for families and those that are below AMI to begin with, or they're at the threshold, is absolutely paramount that we make sure that we're protecting them. Thank you.
So I did not support the slate of for tenant protections that we passed back a little while ago. And the reason is because this was very rushed. We did not have time to evaluate and understand the consequences that we might see. And we did have people come to us after the fact and say, there are problems with this because if you make our landlord give us notice 6 months out, we start looking for an apartment, we find one, but then we can't break our lease for 6 months, so that basically the gap is now too large for people to be notified and then be able to find something. And so it's actually kind of backfired a little bit. And this is the concern I had when we passed it so quickly, was that we didn't know. I know I said the words unintended consequences, and that's exactly what we've seen. Now, it's not that I don't support all of them. That certainly there are ones that I do support, but I think we just took it on too quickly. I think it was basically 6 weeks from the time we saw it the first time until we passed it, which to me is incredibly fast and did not really take into account the fact that there were going to be things that we hadn't thought of yet. So that's already happened.
Thank you. I guess I have 90 seconds on this one. I appreciate this conversation, and I'll offer the perspective as both the council member and what I supported. I did end up supporting the tenant protection measure. I was a little bit disappointed that I felt some of the legislative language was a little bit weak, and so I ended up speaking against that, but then we did make those changes, which I appreciated. So I'm excited that we do have some tenant protections. I'm committed to making that, to working with council and ensuring that we have a stronger tenant protection legislation in place, so including these things that other members of council or candidates have mentioned. But I did want to talk a little bit about why this is important. And it is so important because moving is so costly and disruptive to families. It actually causes disconnection, and it's a significant portion of our community. It's a majority of the members of our community that have experienced this impact. And it's such a great disparity for folks that are in our Black and brown communities. And we recognize that on council, but we often don't necessarily prioritize that. So I'm looking forward to, as mayor, focusing on that. I agree that we should definitely staff a enforcement type of position to help with community members, and then also data collection and registry to understand the scale of affordability problems that we're actually experiencing within the city. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that the council passed these tenant protections. I do feel that in some ways it was a bit rushed, in part because there are inconsistencies between jurisdictions, and when someone rents an apartment, they don't necessarily know if it's Redmond or Kirkland or somewhere else. And so when they come to our city and they rent in our city, the rules are different, and you can see from that list, they're inconsistent. I'm interested in the state taking action on this, because that creates that consistency for us to have to make sure that they have the staff to do the research to understand the long-term implications of it, the unintended consequences, and to help that be better for tenants in our community. I'm also concerned about some of these if they fall into the city, because to be honest, we don't have the budgetary funds to pay for some of these things that would be required in order for them to work well. Some of the ensuring that the rental property is held to a high standard, that is just not funding that we have in our city to support that. Some of those things really do require outside funds. If the state was willing to help us solve that funding problem, then that would be something that we as a city could definitely take on. But I do think it's going to take a much more regional approach, if not statewide approach, to some of these things, in order for the people who are renting in our communities to feel safe and secure, will not feel like they're going to get pushed out. To Councilmember Carson's point, if I got a notice when I was renting that I had 6 months and it was going to go up a huge amount, that would be extremely stressful on my family. So I think there's some things we really need to fix in order to make this program work better.
Thank you for this question. This is very real in my life right now. I currently live in an apartment in Marymore Village where we got a great deal, 2 months free, brand new apartment, and now the rent is increasing this year. And it's without that 2 months free, I'm looking for a new place to live right after the election. So It's a challenging time, but I think that I appreciate what the current council members and the mayor have done for the city in terms of protecting our renters. I mentioned my parents have been lifelong renters. I think there does need to be more evaluation into what can be done further. I think Councilmember Forsyth brought up a really great point in that, if you are renting and you find something that's a little bit more affordable and you have your lease already set through the end of the year, there should be an option for you to be able to find an accessible solution, something that's manageable for you to be able to go rent that place. I mean, that's something that I'm dealing with. I would love to go right now and swap apartments rather than waiting for the end of my lease. And so I think it's really about, I think the question asked about policy clarifications as well. It's really important to look at and do data collection, aggregate what has been done, what was passed, and what's successful moving forward, because I really think, when we're comparing our city to what's lacking in Kirkland or what's really successful in Burien, we really have to compare Redmond to our neighboring jurisdictions. Looking at, for example, we have a 1.5% cap on late rent. Seattle is $10. And so what is successful, what's not successful, and how is that working for the cities?
All right, first off, just the thought of housing and rent and all those things. To me, it's a place that everybody needs to have a safe place, but you go to after a hard day at work or something's, amiss in life. I mean, that's your safe place. You go home, you've got your pets or your kids or whatever, and all for protecting, the rights of renters. A couple of things that kind of stand out to me is absolutely renters should know and understand kind of the protections they have and where they stand, so that's very, very clear. So there's no question, between the renter and the mentee. I don't even know if that's the right word, but just to make sure that they're very clear that those things are very fair and equitable. I like kind of what the mayor said too, going across communities. Again, Redmond and Kirkland are so close together, and you may be in an apartment here and across the street, maybe something comes up, but just kind of knowing the protections that you have for both, and that there should be kind of a little bit more of a cross-community agreements on some of these things as well.
All right, thank you so much, everybody, for taking time to answer that question. You'll have 60 seconds to answer this next question that is about affordable housing. Because financial returns from low-income and below-market housing developments are not high enough to incentivize traditional banking institutions and housing developers to finance and construct that housing for households on the lower end of the income spectrum, public funding is needed to address the lack of availability of below-market housing. Governments at all levels have opportunities to collect revenue for affordable housing from a variety of sources, including taxes, levies, fees. Local funding raised makes it possible for new developments to be competitive when applying for state and federal resources needed to fund an affordable community. A single new housing development likely needs to competitively seek 5 or more different types of funding, I can say this from experience, from federal, state, regional, local, and private sources. So given this reality, what local revenue sources would you support to help finance the production and operations of affordable housing? And please be as specific as you can. We're going to start with position 5, Vanessa.
And as we're transitioning, just to let all candidates know, we actually switched this up a bit to give you 90 seconds each. Oh, sorry.
Well, thank you. I would say in terms of members of the council, I'm probably one of the ones that's the wonkiest. I love being able to do our budgeting, and the first 2 years on the council, I was the chair of our finance committee during a really tough budget time when we faced a $20 million deficit during a global pandemic. And we still found ways to prioritize. One of the things I love about the way that the city of Redmond does our work is that we do budgeting by priorities. We figure out what's important to our community and we invest in it. And I think one of the things that we do need to invest in is affordable housing. And the first place that I look to in terms of local revenue sources is making sure that we actually invest existing city revenues into that. In the last budget that we passed, we invested $10 million into affordable housing, in particular, so we could take advantage of opportunities to do equitable, transit-oriented development and to build out public-private partnerships, which I think is another great opportunity for us at the local level. We have some companies in our area that are really interested in being able to support more affordable housing. This project in particular was one where we had investments from various companies, and they're interested in being able to do more of that. In my role on council, I serve on the Community Facilities District, which is a public-private partnership, a special district that no other city on the state is taking advantage of, where we partner with Microsoft to build city infrastructure. I'd love to be able to see us create more special districts like that or other efforts in collaboration with local companies to be able to create more affordable housing.
Well, thank you. So I think the thing so it talks about local revenue sources, which basically means things are going to be taxes that are going to be levied. And what I support is a little bit different, which is probably the number one, outside of the actual physical construction of a facility, of a multifamily, for example, is the permitting costs, the permitting and the fees that go with the impact fees and things like that. And one of the things that I don't think we've tackled very well at the City of Redmond is this idea of efficiencies in, how do we permit things? Because we do have a full cost recovery model for all of our programs, we don't subsidize any one thing to get more of it. Things have to pay for themselves. And just like with everybody's budget in this room, what we could do, though, is find ways to streamline permitting, because the amount of time that a developer has building going on rather than actually getting people in the building really impacts the final cost. So to me, that is the one thing that we've not tackled, and I want to see us do that.
As a brand new candidate and recently jumping in, there's still a lot for me to learn. So when it comes to how specifically can we fund it, that piece of it I'm still learning. But one of the things that I do know is that if it was as simple as what some might make it seem to be, it would have already been done. I think that Councilmember Carson brought up a great point in being on the Planning Commission. We have a lot of conversation about permitting time. And the developers have absolutely no qualms coming into a planning commission meeting and letting us know what can and can't be done. It's usually what can't be done. Rather than hearing more about what can't be done, I'm very much interested in conversations that are solution-based and exploring what can be done. We will make mistakes. We're not going to hit it out of the ballpark right away. But rather changing the conversation of what can be done. The Together Center is a beautiful example of solution-based leadership and coming together and experimenting and asking questions and being willing to wrestle with the question long enough to figure it out. Because I believe that we can figure it out, but we just need different opinions at the table and more solution-based. I also want to make sure that we're being very aware and data-driven when we're taking a look at what happens when we have standalone segregated housing. What happens and at what levels are we talking about affordable housing? Because that is very vast. Is it supportive permanent housing that we're talking about? Is it workforce? Is it emergency crisis? All of these are very different with varying different regulations for funding.
So I've been working for my term as mayor on all kinds of housing and affordable housing projects, including being on a national League of Cities housing accelerator group that we've been meeting nationally to talk about this issue and just housing in general. So we could talk about this one topic all day if we wanted to. And to Angie's point, if it was easy, we would already be doing it. So I'm going to not pile on with what everyone else has already said, because all of these are solutions to the challenge that we face. I will say that we're already working on streamlining our process in permitting, because we do know that that can be, time is money. We also are working on using some of our vacant properties because property is money as well. And that is one really great way to increase the amount of affordable housing in our community is to use the properties that the city has and use those for affordable housing projects like we did with Providence, like we did with Hope Link. It's not a housing project, but using that property in order for a nonprofit to be there and continue to invest in projects like Together Center and the other projects in our community as well. We also will continue to work with Arch. We'll continue to use our 1590 money. We continue to use our one-time funding. You know, honestly, anything we can use to help with affordable housing we will be doing because the problem is so great, as some of the numbers we were shown, and the problem will continue to exist as long as we continue to need more housing in our community. And so those are all of the investments, all of the above, are the investments that we need to make in order to meet the demand.
Thank you. And just to kind of summarize some things that I've heard that I agree with, I agree with the idea of development fees being a primary source of costs and cost recovery being an important part of that. I'm interested to know what portion of the community's willingness to pay comes into that conversation to understand what the tax base can support, given that affordability is probably the #1 problem that we're facing here in Redmond at the moment. I also support the potential of a housing levy. I think we see that more commonly at the county level than we may see locally in Redmond, but I would be more than happy to entertain that conversation either as a council member or as mayor. And the idea of like low interest loans for financing to help support the mortgage of the property, I think is a unique approach to think about how we leverage those public funds and allow for low interest costs to borrow for enabling a developer to build those lower cost units. I think that would be an important piece of that as well. I also appreciate the conversation around acceleration of housing. One way to do that would be to disincentivize having undeveloped property and potentially look at fees or some sort of a tax on undeveloped property that's destined for affordable units. And then finally, one thing that just recently came to council in our real estate portfolio was the rental of parking for temporary construction use units.
Alrighty, a couple of things just that come to mind. When I came to Redmond over 25 years ago, you just need to start the little clicker there, things. I can't speak for 3 midnight. I was fortunate to be hired by Microsoft, and when we first moved here, we were put into temporary housing. It was the Heights apartment down on Avondale, and just coming out of college, we were like, oh wow, that's super cool. And so I think part of the solution that was alluded to is that private-public relationship. Microsoft's bringing in a lot of people, and they're being paid well, and that increases the housing prices. So there is, I think, a little bit of responsibility there to give back a little bit to be able to accommodate affordable housing. And so I think that that's something more to look into with our big corporations that are around here that can help contribute some of that to solve those problems. Just had a couple other things, the permitting things that were spoken of and fees. I also agree with if we can tighten those up and kind of reduce possibly some of those costs and the time permits, that would help as well. And what everybody says, I mean, you've got to find the right solutions and try new things.
So they mentioned he lived in Heights neighborhood. I actually lived in Hillside East, so one neighborhood over at the same exact time. So I think this question is really important because to me, housing is a human right. I think everyone should have a roof over their heads. I think everyone should have a place that they can go to at night and feel comfortable and feel safe. And that's successful for the future of their lives in any different facet. Business, when they're looking at their extracurriculars, everything in life will be geared after the housing is set. So I really think we need to optimize our existing budgetary resources, and $10 million in allocation toward affordable housing in a city where the AMI is much higher than what a lot of our renters, a lot of our BIPOC community members are making. It's really up to us as local government to be able to support our communities. I actually work for King County Council member Sarah Perry, and the advocacy there is representing 250,000 residents across East King County. And I look really closely at data, and I see a lot of cost burden amongst those lesser privileged, more underrepresented individuals. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to really look at city revenues. It does require making tough decisions, but housing, as I mentioned, is something that will be critical for everyone. I don't think it was mentioned, but grant funding is really important. When you bring it to the local level, I know 7 seconds left. Today, actually, the Department of Housing and Urban Development announced $212 million for affordable housing for folks with disabilities. We should look into that.
So many great ideas and things for us to carry forward in the next 4 years. A couple of the things that I wanted to touch on this topic were the unconventional thought of, as Mayor Bernie has mentioned, using our city land. Our land is so valuable in this area, and I think that the ability for us to have parcel and partner with local businesses to say, okay, we've got the land. Can you bring the rest of the capital? Can you bring the rest of the development? Like the example of the Together Center and what you guys have built here, it's absolutely astounding. And having that land purchased is a huge weight lifted on getting affordable housing. I also think we need to be exploring our business license fee money that we currently take in. So we are about to have a transportation benefit district, and that money will go towards our roads. And a lot of the business license fee money goes towards our roads. So we might have an opportunity, and we need to dig deep and look into this, if we can transfer some of that money into a housing pot of money that we can actually put that towards affordable housing and really have the city step up in a way that hasn't been done so far, and having the city potentially be part owners in some affordable housing.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much for all those insightful answers. The next question is about support for our unhoused community members, and you'll have 60 seconds to respond. Redmond has committed resources to a continuum of care for people experiencing homelessness. However, the deep need on the east side experienced by a growing number of individuals and families goes beyond that current funding level. Do you support additional investments and resources for people who are unhoused? And please be specific about what investments you would support for our unhoused neighbors.
The simplest answer, yes. Do I support it? Yes. The not so simple is that we need to understand that there are varying levels and reasons for our community members being unhoused. We definitely have an affordability issue, not only in housing but also living. We have a mental health issue. We have a racism issue. Unless we start acknowledging that these issues do exist right here in Redmond, then whatever we put in here is going to be abandoned. We just need to understand that. And overall, many of us do not realize just how close we are to being unhoused and already are living with housing instability. And I see this inside of my financial practice. I also see it clearly while volunteering at safe parking programs and having dinner with several of our neighbors. Many of them are women with children. So looking at what are the causes is then going to help us be a little bit more solution-based as to now where do we go and get the money so that we can partner with our neighboring organizations at the root cause.
Not very long. So we already do have additional investments that have not come online yet, and I just want to highlight the Health Through Housing facility in Overlake, which is going to house, we don't know exactly how many homeless individuals long term. And I mean, getting it up and running has been difficult because I don't think the vision was exactly ready to go when the money were starting to be collected and the different facilities were being purchased. But that said, now the council is going to have the chance to make sure that the facility is going to have the guardrails that we want for our community, that isn't going to cause an undue burden on the surrounding neighborhood. And so those investments are going to happen, have happened, and we're going to see the fruit of them shortly. It is incredibly short for this topic. So, who's next?
This way.
All right. To be specific, yes, I do indeed support additional investments. Have been successful in the council in working together to support some of that additional resourcing for the past 2 to 4 years. Specifically, I'd love to see investments additionally in the city for workforce development, perhaps also further funding for transportation assistance and housing assistance direct to individuals. We already have some of those programs, so we look to expand them. And then also, I appreciate that Angie mentioned the addressing of root causes, so we make sure our partnerships with nonprofits are providing the adequate support, and we funded those for supporting mental health and addiction, and then also leading as a city by example to become an anti-racist community.
Yes, we already have pretty significant investments. We have a very successful outreach program. Our Tisa Rutherford, who works for us with other supports, has been extremely successful in housing our unhoused neighbors in our community. Help Through Housing, we have been a solid partner from the beginning, taking all the heat, but making sure we're staying on track in order to house people. We also have other permanent supportive housing things in the works. We have Housing Here from 0 to 30. We have a bellwether project we're working on. We have a crisis care levy that passed that we'll be working with on that to help people get addiction and other behavioral health treatments. We'll continue to work on all of these things. We have our community court that also helps people with some of those root causes, as Angie mentioned. We have actually in our city an extremely good, robust program to help people who are experiencing homelessness get into housing and stay in housing and be healthy. And I can share more. I sit on the Regional Homeless Authority, and this is the work I do monthly, daily, and some of the work that I do for our community, for our region.
I think the mayoral candidates covered it a lot of what I was trying to cover, but I had the opportunity to visit Reclaim Shelter recently, formerly Snoqualmie Valley Shelter Services, and just one of the most simple things that I saw that they had was something that you can use to sanitize your belongings when you enter that shelter. And when I asked them, how were they funding it, they actually had to get that donated. And, it's something that you would think every shelter should have. So I think partnering with our local agencies who are working on the ground, I know MCRC is a really great, organization that does transitional housing that helps support women who are experiencing homelessness, and really investing in these resources that they might need to support folks that are experiencing their housing instability. I also think workforce development is really critical, working with One Redmond and creating opportunities for folks to get those jobs, get on their feet so that they can actually provide for themselves in a future capacity, and then partnering with the other, partnering with organizations.
Would you like 4 seconds? Yeah, so absolutely yes, I do support investments for people that are in house, and primarily there's a couple of areas that I'm a little bit passionate about. One is mental health and the other is addiction, and sometimes when you're dealing with people with mental health crisis or issues or addiction, it's difficult even to provide some of that housing for them because they may want to just stay on the streets. And so my thoughts or the ideas as far as those investments would go into programs to assist those that have mental health concerns or addictions, to be able to teach them, help them kind of overcome some of their challenges. What a great opportunity it would be for them to kind of be able to overcome some of those things and then be able to get into some housing that's provided. So.
I'm back. Fantastic. Yes, absolutely. I support more resources for housing the unhoused, but I want to take a second and break some stigma here. The vast majority of people who are unhoused is because of health care. It's because they can't afford health care. It's because their child was diagnosed with cancer, and they did everything they could, including selling their house. So we have a lot of work to do on this topic. It is a huge, huge topic. And now we're seeing people losing their housing because they can't afford the rent. So we have a lot of work to do. We need to invest further in safe parking programs. We need to invest in our nonprofits that are helping with job training. We absolutely have to invest with mental health. We have to give more support, and we have already invested in more support for another housing outreach coordinator, homelessness outreach coordinator. We have a lot of work to do in this arena, but I really just wanted to take that second and break down some of the stigma around homelessness, because it's not a one problem issue. It is a vast issue.
Well, I will actually follow up on that. I think one of the learnings that we had out of the healthcare housing project getting established is that there's a lot of misinformation that can get out there about what permanent supportive housing is. And I think as a city, we can do more to let people know that actually providing people with housing plus wraparound services is the best way, when you look across the boards, to be able to reduce rates of homelessness. And it's something we can invest in more if we bring our community along with us. Secondly, I think I would love to be able to see us increase the support into our homeless outreach program. And then finally, really being able to support the culturally responsive community-based organizations that we partner with often to be able to provide resources like rental assistance, like food and other supportive services. In the pandemic, we saw some amazing groups pop up that filled in the gaps. People who were running food drives, people who started up new hygiene-focused nonprofits, really looking at what people who are on house need across the boards to be able to thrive. I want to see us invest more in that. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And Vanessa, you teed up the next question really well here. And you'll have 60 seconds, everyone will have 60 seconds to respond on this one. We know that this is a topic with that can elicit a range of emotions and opinions. So how will you, in your role with the city, navigate strongly divergent opinions from residents and stakeholders? And we'll start with Mayor Bernie.
Thank you. I have done this a lot in the last 4 years. My goal, for my own self, I need to make sure that I'm making decisions for our community that I can live with and I can sleep well at night. And I feel like I've done that on multiple controversial issues in the last year to reiterate some of the things that we've already talked about, in particular about homelessness and the health through housing side. That was the right thing to do in the right place at the right time with the right partners. And I'm really excited that it will soon be opening with the Salvation Army. We'll do the work to make it happen. But there was never a doubt in my mind that it was the right thing to do. I know there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation out in the community, and we did our very best to inform people, keep people in the loop, and let them know what the realities were. We also used our partners. It was mentioned earlier that we created partners during the pandemic. We already had those partners prior to the pandemic that we continue to use in those relationships that I have built, that we have built as a community, continue on to ensure that we get the right information out to people in order to keep the truth being the right direction.
Thank you. This is an interesting question. I have a different approach than Mayor Bernie on this item. So a couple things that come to mind is to make sure that there's a strong communications plan before deploying any particular new change to the community, and making sure there's a notification process in place, and potentially publishing what that will be and setting that expectation up front to provide that structure for at least a healthy engagement or a healthy structure. Most of the feelings that come out of some of these debates are resulting from surprise, whatever level that the stakeholder or that resident might have, that we as council members and the mayor need to listen to and acknowledge. And we can work through essentially those feelings of what is frustration, upset, and disappointment, and hopefully get folks on to a conversation where we're accepting what will be coming and then also agreeing to disagree in certain areas. We're all adults in this case. So we hope we leave the room with a smile on our face, if not a friendly greeting for at least the next time.
So it's all the way down to the
All right, so for most of my career, I've been involved in program and product management, and What that entails is working with a couple of extreme groups. For example, I've had the opportunity to work with some developers, software developers who are very opinionated on how things get built, and then also the stakeholders and managers. And so I've kind of been that interpreter between the two, help them understand each other, and been kind of the referee. The main thing is to focus on the common good. We have a problem that needs to be solved. We can all agree on that. There's going to be multiple ideas and decisions and choices of how it's solved, but we need to keep focused on what that problem is and ultimately do the right thing for the community. Also want to make absolutely sure that the residents of Redmond get heard, because there are lots of loud voices and extremes on both sides of all topics and issues, and residents need to be heard.
So this is something that I actually have a lot of experience dealing with. In my time at UW, I actually had the opportunity to serve as student body president. So I advocated for and represented over 45,000 students at the local, state, and administrative levels. And during my tenure there was a controversial speaker who came to campus, and you had to weigh both sides. You know, this is not an area that you can look at and just make a clear-cut decision. You really have to talk to the stakeholders. So the most important thing that I did, that I will continue to do in this role, will be to listen. Listen to every single perspective, really understand all of the sides of the situation, and be able to come to a consensus that is based on, you know, how our future will look like. Because, you know, when you look at issues like behavioral health, when you look at issues like housing, they don't know political affiliation, they don't know opinions, they don't know, you know, your background. It's really up to us to address root causes. And in that situation, you know, what I did was really talk to stakeholders, understand what's important to different groups, and come to a consensus. Because at the end of the day, we all love Redmond, we love this community, and this is where we call home.
Sorry to clap, we're allowed to clap. So yeah, listen, honestly, that is the key here. I think just, we all come from different backgrounds, we have different lived experience, and we need to just sit down, break down rhetoric, break down barriers, and listen to each other and have a conversation. If you can get through that rhetoric and get to the root causes of why you believe the things you do, what experiences you've had to make you think the things that you do, and that bringing us all to the same table just does so much. We have to come to an understanding, and there's never going to be a perfect solution for everybody's issues. So coming together, listening, we had a lot of experience with this through the pandemic, through vaccine mandates, through health, through housing, and even just with each other on council of differing opinions. It's okay to disagree, but we do have to find a way to move forward together.
I think this is definitely a key question for many of us that have been on council. It's been an exciting couple of years. I think, you know, for me, the way that I lead is really as a community-based leader, and focusing on making sure whenever we make a policy decision that I'm getting a diversity of perspectives about what impact that policy will make on these different communities. And sometimes I'm not always going to agree with the diversity of people that I talk to, but I do try to be honest about the fact that of where I stand, the questions I have, and to be able to, as much as possible, integrate different ideas into the policies we have, and to follow up with people when they don't necessarily get what they want, to try to explain, you know, where I came from. I think one of the other pieces that we can do to be able to make sure that we have good policy development is to have those who have the lived experience and who are most impacted by policies be a part of creating those. One of the things that I focused on in our regulations around permanent supportive housing is to make sure that the groups that would create our community relations plan would include people with lived experience in homelessness.
Thank you. So I guess the answer for me is I already have addressed with a couple of leaders from a resident group. We spent 3 hours talking about the Health Through Housing project and how they thought it was going to impact their part of the community. And I said it's not all baked in yet. We have decision points. We have many things to do. And I said, and they were kind of blaming the city for things that we had no control over because we were not the decision maker. We did not choose to buy the facility. We are going to be part of the solution, And I think all of us on council now want to see very much a successful implementation. The way that happens is to listen to the community, their concerns, don't pass them off as being irrational. They're not. They believe these things, even if they are not potentially accurate. So.
One of the things that we've seen in area organizations is that when there is a shift in leadership that is more representational of the surrounding communities or the communities in which we're trying to interact with and engage with, then there is an increased engagement because there is increased trust. And that's not to say that any of the council members are not trustworthy. However, if we don't acknowledge the experience that some of our communities have endured, then they're not going to be forthcoming and engaging. So while yes, there are strongly divergent opinions from residents and stakeholders, I don't believe that all of the voices have been heard, first of all. Second, of course, active listening, asking the questions, keeping my mouth shut and just listening to what they say. Being able to straddle worlds in the way that I have throughout my entire life, both racially and socioeconomically, I'm able to be a bridge builder in a very, very effective way. And another is educating that, again, as Councilmember Forsyth had mentioned, removing the stigma, because being unhoused isn't just about addiction and mental wellness.
Thank you all. We're going to tackle the next question around middle housing, and you'll each have 60 seconds. We know that is a brief amount of time. Okay, House Bill 1110 will soon require all Eastside jurisdictions to allow more units per lot in neighborhoods, including those that are currently only allowing single-family dwellings. What do you see as the top barriers to middle housing production, and what would you do to address those? We'll start with Bozeman.
Great. So I am incredibly honored to have received an endorsement from State Rep Jessica Bateman, who led House Bill 1110. And I sought that endorsement because missing middle and middle housing is incredibly important to me and the future of Redmond. Honestly, I think looking at the top issues, I think one of the barriers is incentivization. We really have to look at how these ADUs, duplexes, triplexes are actually incentivized for our neighbors, talking to residents so that they actually have the education that you're able to put something in your backyard if that's allowed, because a lot of that lack of awareness, lack of knowledge just needs to be addressed when it comes to our residents. And then working with developers on where we're actually building and how we're building those developments with a green focus, with a focus of affordability, and then making sure that we're incentivizing that development so that we can have this housing for years on. I have 10 seconds. One thing that I did at UW is actually work with then Seattle City Council member Rob Johnson on bringing a student group forward to increase the upzoning. So now you have a lot more housing at UW.
Yeah, this is a tricky one, especially in this area. We do have a lot of focus on affordable housing, and then those that can afford the higher housing, they can just do that. So it's kind of that middle housing that's really tricky. And I like the idea of incentives. If you have a large lot and you have a big backyard, that'd be kind of cool if you could kind of build a little mini house or something in the back and be able to rent it out to somebody. Maybe have an incentive to, get a discount on some taxes or property tax. I don't know, but there's things to be discussed and figured out. But there's a lot of, I think, cool opportunities to be able to do things like that. Again, it's a very, very tricky one to kind of fix and solve in this area. And even as my kind of housing costs go up and I get older and look at retirement, I mean, I would like to kind of live more in that middle range and stay in this area, but not so sure how that's going to happen yet.
This is definitely a tricky one, but I think that there's a lot that we can do. I've heard from some of our developer community that it needs to be easier to buy multiple lots so that they can build condos and that they can build middle housing. Missing middle housing bill was, we kind of got ourselves into this situation through many years of not paying attention to fixing that problem. And it was a great honor of mine to testify at the state level on the need for this. I'm a renter. I'm the only current renter on council, and middle housing is something that I would love to see myself moving into, but at this point, there's just not enough of it. So doing what we can to incentivize condos, incentivize apartments that you can maybe rent to buy, anything that we can do to get people housed into more stable housing so that those rent issues of rent increases, maybe that turns into a mortgage over time and is a much more stable way to afford your housing.
Well, I'd say, I think one of the things that I'm proudest that I've done on council is to pass our housing action plan, which looks at holistically the need across our city of the types of housing we need. And that's going to give us the roadmap for addressing a lot of our housing issues. And I think one of the big things that we have coming up is to pass our comp plan. Something I'm proud of that we did is before even HB 1110 was passed, we were already in the drafts of our comp plan looking at taking out language where you have single family zoning and putting in the ability to have triplex, duplex, multiplex in there, as well as we were also looking at opportunities to make it easier to be able to develop ADUs and taking away some of those barriers. I think now part of our issue is to make sure that we actually are listening to those who would hopefully develop these about any sort of barriers that continue to be there so that we can see more of this housing created. And then finally, making sure that we provide adequate transit to the areas we're adding more density so that people can actually get around without cars from these areas.
As soon as I read this question, I immediately wrote down the word permits. On the Planning Commission, one of the things that we're hearing from the developers is the permitting process, and we've heard it up and down this panel as well. Permits are immediately one of the toughest things. Another is making sure that we've got flexibility within our comprehensive plan. This past year, we've been doing a lot of work looking for over the next 25 years and what we want to see, and making development a bit easier and more streamlined to where it's going to allow for the middle housing. When I take a look kind of with my business lens at our inventory, we don't have any diversity in our inventory. We've got two products on the shelves. We've got an apartment and we've got a single family, multi-level home, and that's it. There's nothing in between. So for us to be sustainable, we have got to figure out the middle housing piece, and whether that is pushing back on state law around condo laws, if that is equity inside of apartments, we've got to bring more voices to the table so that we can figure out this solution.
So when we talk about missing middle housing, at least in the last couple of years, we've seen a tremendous amount of developers starting to build apartments with 3 bedrooms, which really would be that missing middle in the rental housing market. So what we're really talking about is ownership. And I mentioned in my opening statement about we don't have a place to buy that we can move to downsize. And what that means it actually has a much wider impact than just on us, because it means a family can't be in the house that we currently live in. And so you end up with families getting larger in apartments when they don't really want to be there, but they can't afford to buy something because there aren't enough of the houses that we're in, and we can't get out. It's a really confounding cycle that unfortunately it's all a system, and if we don't change the liability laws for condominiums, we will never get out of this.
All right, for 60 seconds, I'm super excited to be the first one who says that the problem with affordable housing is a lack of living wages. So I fundamentally believe that not being able to make rent is a huge issue. I think being able to pay mortgage payment is another piece of that. Specifically to answer this question, top barriers to middle housing production, in addition to living wage access, is redevelopment incentives for existing affordable housing, legislative barriers which we're addressing on the council through our comp plan amendments. I think the building height is a arbitrary restriction, and then also things like a lack of commercial properties and availability of middle-class job opportunities within the city in the first place. If we don't have living wages for middle class or workforce housing, we will not be seeing a workforce or middle class in the city anytime soon. So I think there's some general economic incentives. I do appreciate Mr. Carson pointing out that it's a lack of economic mobility within Redmond.
Amen.
I'll talk about the condominium thing, the next question. So I was really pleased that I and my staff worked really hard with both Rep. Bateman and the entire legislature to get this passed where it's actually usable for cities and pushing the envelope on what would happen. Also lobbying with AWC and Association of Washington Cities in order to get all our cities behind this as well. So I worked really hard in the last few years on this, and I was really excited to see what was passed because it was really what we wanted, what we needed. And I want to thank Carol Helen, who's sitting in the audience, because she was a big part of that. But we have more work to do. We still have a barrier. You're asking barriers. Barriers are HOAs. There will be a barrier to this, and we have to tackle that. We also have been working with developers who develop this smaller type of housing and what do you need in order to make this happen. I'm really interested to incentivize it, to really think differently about how we do things in our community. And I think we have to be really thoughtful about it to the other points. Unless we get smaller houses, smaller ownership opportunities, we're not going to get the movement we need in our community to get people out of their big homes to something smaller.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see, I think Chad is going to bring up a slide here. We're going to talk a little bit about the racial homeownership gap. We have some data here on the slide for your reference. In Washington State, there exists a glaring racial homeownership gap, which is 49% of BIPOC households owning their homes, as opposed to 68% of white households. In Redmond, the gap is striking, where 55% of white households are homeowners, while 27% of Hispanic Latinx and 19% of Black African Americans own their homes. The strong disparity outlined in the recent state report emphasizes the pressing need for action to promote more equitable homeownership. What are some considerations and strategies you bring to your role at the city to approach closing the racial homeownership gap? We'll start with position 3, Jessica.
Thank you. Thank you. There it is. Yes, so at the state level, I was very proud to have watched my dear friend, Representative Jamila Taylor, pass the Housing Covenant Bill, which basically was a reparations bill to bring those who had been traditionally excluded from homeownership through redlining. It created a fund, which was a minimal additional fee on your closing costs of $100. That money goes into an account that those that have been traditionally excluded can now use that money to help buy a house through a grant loan program. So I think we need to be creative. I think we need to look at something similar to that here in Redmond. I mean, look at these numbers. They are astounding. So getting creative on some of these solutions really, really needs to happen. It needs to happen at our level. I just read an article this morning about how for a house to feel affordable to a new owner of my generation, our salaries would need to be increased by 55%. So that wage gap is real. The inflation costs and APRs on housing is real. The fight that we need to have to make sure that more folks have an opportunity to buy a home, who want to buy a home, is something that we really need to dig deep and study.
Is this, sorry, 90 seconds or something? Yeah, okay, great. I think following up on the last conversation, I think one of the first things is that we do need to create more missing middle housing, and we need to create more affordable for purchase homes, since at the moment, I think a $1 million home in Redmond is like a low-priced home, and I don't know how people are supposed to be able to afford that, and especially, given what we know about the disparities in terms of home ownership, that's going to be one area where if we can actually have lower-priced homes that are more affordable for families to be able to access. Second is access to financing tools. We recognizing that that different populations historically have had different access to financing tools. And I think in particular, working with our community-based organizations that are culturally responsive. For example, I know our city works really closely with Centro Cultural Mexicano to be able to connect for other services, whether it's providing rental assistance or even when we were doing vaccines during the pandemic, to have a trusted messenger be able to work on being able to deliver information on ways to be able to access resources. I'd love to see that in terms of looking at access to finance tools, as well as getting their insights and our other community-based organizations' insights on what are some of the barriers that these communities are actually facing, so that we can confront those. And then I think finally looking at affordability holistically and being able to address some of the things that take up people's incomes, such as childcare access, which can cost as much as housing for many families. Thanks.
Well, thank you. So this is a particularly difficult thing because I don't know that anybody up here has the answer to this. Redmond is a particularly unaffordable place to live. It's desirable. Anytime you have more demand than supply, you're going to have prices go up. It's what happens in an economy. I know that when my wife and I moved here back in '91, you could say, well, things were a lot more affordable. Well, I never thought that my first house would be $500,000, but it was. It was way more than I thought we could afford at the time. We could have obviously afforded it, but now I don't know that I could afford the same house in the same neighborhood. So I think generally we have just an unaffordability problem. I don't know correlation-wise what that means for other for different racial segments of the population, but I know that we had to buy a condominium first and get that money kind of sunk into that. It was affordable at the time for us, and then we moved into a house, which obviously was more expensive. So it's this graduation from one to the next and back that if we don't have that back piece kind of harped on, we won't see people being able to afford it. So.
I think before we go anywhere, we've got to know where we are and where we've been. How did we get to where we are? After doing a lot of research around why do Seattleites come over here, or Eastsiders go to Seattle and Seattle doesn't go to the East Side? And getting to that root cause and what root cause analysis is. And one of the things that we don't talk about is the development of the East Side and the exclusionary practices in which the East Side was built. And then when we start getting to that point of acknowledgement, then we can get to, okay, now where do we go from that point? When we talk about generational wealth, who was owning the houses on the East Side? Where did that money come from? How did it get passed down throughout the communities? If now we're talking around BIPOC home ownership, and many of us would be a first-time homeowner, and there's a lot of things that go along with first-gen to opportunity. But if we're now talking about being a first-time homeowner, we don't have any real step-in basis. We don't have any, many incentives for us to get into our first home. How do we do it? Having access to the vehicles, and even understanding that we have a very complicated relationship when it comes to money to begin with. But before we can really talk a whole lot more about that, we've got to acknowledge where we've been.
So a few things I think about, and then correlation is not causation, but I think about many years ago, we built, condominiums were built, and they weren't built very well, and we had this big condominium liability reform law that passed that made it really challenging to build condominiums. And at the same time, Redmond was growing a lot. So in Redmond, you could purchase a single family home, but condos were not being built in Redmond. I think it's about time that the state legislature takes a really hard look at this and changes the law. Our codes and our building requirements have far exceeded when those laws came into place, when the liability came into place, and we need to create opportunities for smaller home ownership, starter homes, be they condos, be they small townhouses, be they dividing up those lots into the middle housing, whatever it might be. But there are things that are getting in the way of us creating those smaller housing units for people to even get that start, like Carson was talking about. Those just don't exist in our community. We're a very wealthy community with very expensive housing, and in part because we just don't have things that are much smaller. The things that are being built are really large, and they're for wealthy families, which is lovely. But we really need to provide those opportunities for people to have homeownership at a much smaller scale in order to get that step in and creating that place in our community for our diverse community members to start that homeownership line. A diversity in our community also started around the same time, so it's not surprising that more white people own homes in Redmond than our diverse population, because that has just been, no starter homes have been being built basically since that time.
All right, this has been a complex conversation already, but one assumption that I wanted to point out is that it seems like we're assuming that home ownership is somehow better than being a renter, and it is not necessarily true. It's also not necessarily true that home ownership is everybody's goal, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. I did appreciate what Angie mentioned about acknowledging our history, and I would love to frame this question more as addressing what can the city do to address the racial wealth gap, which includes things like preferences for disadvantaged business enterprises and making sure that wealth can be generated by communities that have historically not been able to do so. And also focus on maybe programs that are, just shooting out some ideas here, programs that can assist with land acquisition or purchase of property, private property for preferred individuals of some kind. There's ways that you can work through affirming a background or history as opposed to shutting them out. And then number one on my list here is address discriminatory practices in property management as well as in real estate. So gotta shut it out, make sure it's not happening and continuing, and then we can work on building within the community.
Where am I going?
Yeah, it's very, very tricky and complex. And like, if I were to move to this area right now and try to buy the house that I live in now, I could not do that. Affordable housing is one big issue. Also the wage gap that was spoken of. It's huge. I mean, even you don't want somebody to get in and buy and own a house that they're paying 40+% of their income. They're not going to be able to make it. And it's very difficult to be able to do that. So again, we're in a very unique situation, a unique city where there is, as the mayor mentioned, I mean, a lot of people that have a lot of money live here. A lot of people desire to live here. And it's just very tricky. I think looking at jobs, the wage gap, different things like that would help out a lot, but it's a very difficult problem to kind of figure out and solve.
So this question is, again, as I mentioned in my intro, really dear to my heart. My parents, lifelong renters, and have not been able to purchase their own home. I wish they were actually a part of that 52% renter as Pakistani immigrants. They're Asian, but they don't live in Redmond anymore. So, I think we need to keep all of our neighbors within this community. I was actually on the housing market. Last year, I got approved for a great loan, and I couldn't afford anything in Redmond. I could move to Black Diamond, but I don't want nothing against them. I don't want them to, I wish that there were more options for first-time home buyers from all different backgrounds, and I think Mayor Bernie hit the nail on the head. We just need more of those options. We need, smaller units. We need condos. We need to be able to diversify our options. And I'm surprised I'm the last speaker and no one said this, but I think we need to really invest in 10-minute communities. We need to look at each of our neighborhoods and really provide that. I think actually Councilmember Kritzer was trying to mention this, but childcare is incredibly expensive. Going, 10 minutes out of your community, 20 minutes, 30 minutes away from where you live will end up being very expensive, both in terms of your time, but also the cost that it will take. So those 10-minute communities will help alleviate some of that, especially if we build it around, permanent housing solutions that are sustainable long-term, and help build equity within communities that are, historically discriminated against, historically, don't have the same opportunities as others.
Well, thank you all for your incredibly thoughtful responses to these very tricky questions. We are at closing statements, so you'll each have 60 seconds, which we know is a short amount of time, but to offer any closing comments you want to make. And we're going to start with Vanessa.
Yeah, well, I'll just say it's been an honor to be able to serve on the council the last 4 years, and I'm running for re-election this year because I think it's a critical time to determine what kind of city Redmond is going to turn into. We can go a lot of different paths, and I think in particular how we think about investing in housing that can be accessed by people of a variety of backgrounds and income levels is going to determine the type of community that we become in the long term. The people that you vote for this election will vote on our comprehensive plan for the next 30 years, which will shape our path. I've been working in my time on council to be able to shape that, and I'd like the chance to be able to finish it. I worked on actually enacting the Housing Action Plan, and I'd like to pass the policies that are proposed within that plan. I also helped to pass our Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, which I think is key to making sure that we grow not only in an equitable way, but also a sustainable way, and I'd like to make sure that I can finish that work, so I hope you'll give me the opportunity. Thank you.
Redmond is one of the largest growing cities in Washington. I am bringing my whole self to this position, which will allow for both critical thinking and empathy that's required for effective code amendments and new legislation. My ability to navigate both the micro and macro levels, seeing the relationships there within, supports my effectiveness in this. Now, although a newcomer to local government, I am no stranger to being of service, and since the very beginning of my campaign, I have demonstrated my highest value of integrity and being encouraged and encouraging accountability, as I see this as being called up and not being called out. For more than 20 years, my sense of purpose has been to strive to make the world a better place before bedtime in the largest way possible, and not just for those that are here now, but more so for the generations to come and those who have been marginalized and excluded. I've worked hard building both local and regional relationships during this past year, and I am proud of the hard work in raising funds from diverse contributors and earning the many endorsements listed on my website. As a solution-based leader who understands that we are stronger together, I am looking forward to joining the council in stewarding Redmond and being an example of what's possible and collective.
So I've been on the council for a number of years. I'm the only council member, or actually only person in city government now, that was there from the beginning with the planning for light rail. It is important that we execute we finish off this process correctly, that we make sure that it does the things we envisioned in the first place, that it doesn't impact adversely our residents, because I think there's a potential that it could. It's been a privilege to serve on the council for these surprisingly many years now. It is, sometimes it just feels like you're just hitting your stride. You're much more effective. I know that my first term I felt like I'm learning the ropes, and then second term it just keeps gradually building. And 60 seconds is an incredibly short amount of time to sum up what you'd like to say. So anyway, I hope you'll vote for me. It's been a privilege. Thank you to the Together Center for hosting this.
And thank you, of course, for hosting us tonight. It's been my honor and privilege to serve on your council for the past 6 years as a past vice president, as well as currently Public Safety and Human Services Committee Chair. A few key accomplishments that I'm very proud of are passing our green energy commitment and also our Vision Zero resolution, both of which passed unanimously. And I just wanted to describe a little bit about what the future of Redmond looks like with me as your mayor, and that includes accelerating our climate change mitigation practices, especially with relationship to infrastructure and in commitment with light rail, clear communications for community involvement, and especially crisis preparedness. Many programs within the city retooled for comprehensive inclusion practices, internal accountability for wages, labor relations, and budget. And with your help, I believe I can win this race, that I'm the best fit candidate for this job, and that we can change the world together. So thank you so much for your time, and I ask for your vote in November.
Well, first, thank you all for being here tonight and listening to all of us. This was actually a really wonderful opportunity, so thank you for bringing us all together to hear these different voices and hear different thoughts and see how much commonality we actually have with each other. That was wonderful. And as we noted, these are really complicated issues that take a lot of partnership, a lot of working together, a lot of listening, and a lot of working not just within the city, but regionally, nationally, statewide, in order to get these things done. And I am that proven leader that has done this for the last 4 years. I will continue to do that hard work, ensuring that we are making Redmond the best place for everyone to stay and live here, creating those opportunities to provide housing, to provide stability, to create a more sustainable environment for our community, and to ensure that people who live here are able to stay and thrive and be part of what makes Redmond such a wonderful community. So I ask for your vote when ballots drop next week. Thank you so much for being part of this community.
Well, thank you all so much for this opportunity. I just want to start by saying, this is something that I really see as a collective vision. I believe that I have the experience. I alluded to my role as student body president. I work for King County Council member Sarah Perry, so I've been experienced in community advocacy, community engagement. But I think beyond that, I have sort of the will and the vision to be able to hit the ground running. I've been campaigning since February, and I've knocked on over 6,000 doors, which is actually something that I'm incredibly proud of, to be able to talk with neighbors, learn about their priorities, and actually adapt them to what my priorities on Redmond City Council will be. I'm very honored and grateful to have earned over 68% of Redmond residents' support in the primary election, which is something that I'm not taking for granted. I will be out door knocking this weekend and talking to more neighbors. But as the only candidate who's grown up in this area and gone to school here, I believe it's my duty to give back to the youth, and we have a youth ambassador program that I'm really proud of continuing on when I'm elected.
So yes, thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight on this Thursday evening. And thank you, Kim, and all for setting this up. A couple of things that come to mind. I'm a concerned Redmond citizen. I am not a politician, but I am committed to be a public servant. And I live in this community. I have concerns. I want to help be able to solve some of those problems. And most of my career, that's what I do, is solve problems, bring people together to figure out how to solve problems. And in this community, we've got a lot of really, really smart people in this community that is changing the world, solving a lot of problems in business and all sorts of things. I think when we come together, we can figure a lot of this stuff out and work on what's best for the citizens of Redmond and the community. And just ask for your vote. Vote for Nate before November 7th.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming out tonight. Thanks to the Together Center. It's been an honor to serve as the Parks and Human Services Chair in my first 2 years and as Council President these last 2 years. I just wanted to say I'm really excited for all the candidates that are up here with me tonight. It's not easy to put yourself out there and do this. I see some candidates in the audience, so thank you all for running. It's probably the longest and worst job interview you'll ever have. But we all do it for one reason, and that is our community and our love for the community and our opportunity to serve our neighbors. And it's been a goal of mine while being in office to break down barriers and make government more accessible. So if you have any further questions, please reach out. I hope that you see the passion and energy and drive that we all have for our community, and that I've been able to answer some of your questions tonight and make it clear why I'm running for this community, why I want to continue serving this community, and it will be an honor to earn your vote on or before November 7th.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you all for your time, your commitment to the community, for running, for putting yourselves out there. Thank you to the audience for being here, for being engaged, for being part of this community. And let's have a nice round of applause for